Hi, I'm Andy Teach, host of Andy's Awesome Adventures, and today we're in the Big Apple, New York City. I am in Times Square. I'm about to embark on a 9-hour tour of New York City in Manhattan with a tour company called New York Tour One, and New York Tour One with the number 1. I found them on TripAdvisor. They got all 5-star reviews. I really like their website. They have a lot of choices of different tours, but I took the mega tour today called the 9-hour tour. So most people outside New York don't know this, but there are actually 5 what's called boroughs of New York City. Manhattan is the main borough, that's where most people visit. But the other 4 boroughs are Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and a borough where I am from originally called the Bronx. And the Bronx houses a sports cathedral known as Yankee Stadium. Need I say more? All right, this is our tour guide, Bobby, and we're about to go on a 9-hour tour. Bobby, am I gonna pass out after a 9-hour tour?
You won't pass out, but your feet might hurt a little bit.
All right.
But I try to make stops along the way.
All right, I got my sneakers, thank you.
Wonderful. We are set for a really long day today. You guys have 7 hours, you guys have 9. Absolutely. Now for my 9-hour friends, I am gonna let you know, if at any point you need to stop, I work until 6:30. However, you don't have to work until 6:30. If it becomes 6 o'clock and your feet are killing you, I will put you on a subway, I will put you on a taxi cab. It is completely up to you. I would say about 30% of the people who book 9 hours stay until 6:30. Say about 90% stay until 6 o'clock. So you guys are good to go. Also, because the group is rather small, if we need to stop and sit, maybe grab a coffee. It is hot today, maybe a glass of water, anything like that. I'm more than happy to do it. Just please voice what you need to do. Otherwise, I'll just keep going, okay? I'm like the Energizer Bunny. My name is Bobby. I introduced myself in email last night. I am a professional New York City tour guide. I also mentioned I do work in the Broadway community. Not important for today, but what is cool is if you guys are here for a while, I might be able to help you get into a Broadway show at a discount, okay? So we start our tour here in Times Square. We actually are not going to spend a lot of time here. Well, it can get pretty crazy here. So before it does, I want to give you the history of this neighborhood and get the heck out of here, all right? Times Square was built in 1903. They originally called it Longacre Square because it's actually an acre long. Now, New Yorkers thought the name was pretty lame, and it was actually difficult for New York City to convince businesses to move up here. We call Times Square Midtown today, you guys. They called it Uptown back then because most of the city at this part hadn't been developed yet. Now, they kind of had to bribe businesses to come on down, and that's where they got their new name. Can anybody guess what the Times Square area is named after? The New York Times! Oh, the New York Times, you guys. They bribed them to move to this neighborhood about 100 years ago. If everybody takes a look at the back, you'll notice a big tower with all the billboards on it, right in the center. Believe it or not, underneath that building, underneath the billboards is a building that used to be the headquarters of the New York Times. They used to write the paper there every single day. They built it right around 1904. In the 1960s, the building became a national landmark, meaning you cannot tear it down, but the Times moved out about in the 70s and 80s. They built a bigger tower about 3 blocks away, and when they moved out, the building's just been sitting there empty. The only tenant is the Walgreens at the bottom. Nobody lives inside, nobody works inside. Can anybody guess how they pay their property taxes? Advertising, absolutely. Yes. Advertising revenue. Those billboards on the center are some of the most expensive billboards in the world. The smallest ones cost about $500,000 a month to operate. So TDK, just that little teeny one, 500 grand a month, you guys, to operate and pay their rent. The bigger the billboards get, the more expensive they get. Now at the top of the tower, it does say 2015. There's a lighted ball up there, you guys. That actually is the ball that came down on New Year's. I'm about to like burst all of your dreams. It's a lot smaller in real life. On TV, they zoom in so incredibly close. All it does is go to the top of that tower and fall down really slow. About 1 million people stand here in the freezing cold. It's usually snowing. There are no bathrooms. You are standing for at least 6 hours like sardines right here, waiting, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 1. Happy New Year. Let's get back to our hotel. What's really funny is locals do not come to Times Square for New Year's. However, I go to parties in some of the other boroughs, and like after New Year's, you're kind of done, right? So at 12:15, I've been in Times Square just 15 minutes after the ball drops. It's a ghost town. Trash all over the street. Nobody's here. Everyone has gone back to their hotels because it's so freezing cold outside. Now, the New York Times here moved here 100 years ago. So did the Broadway community. Broadway used to exist down in Soho, you guys. However, when they built the subway system, they actually built the hub right here in Times Square to make people have to go in this neighborhood. And the Broadway producers realized that if they wanted people to come to their shows, they might as well be near where the subway was. There used to be about 80 Broadway theaters in the neighborhood. Due to the invention of radio, television, movies, not everybody goes to the theater anymore. We only have 40 Broadway theaters left. They're within about a 10-block radius of right where we're standing. Despite the fact there are only 40 Broadway theaters left, Broadway was more successful last year than it ever has been in history, which is why tickets for Wicked are like $300, right? They didn't used to be so expensive, you guys. Very rarely do you see all 40 Broadway theaters with a tenant inside. There's at least usually a couple changing over the shows. So yeah, that's basically Times Square. People come here for the lights, you guys. They come here for the entertainment, the Broadway theaters, and that's about it. The rest of the city kind of awaits us, so we're gonna head to our next stop, which is the Diamond District, all right? Real estate up here about 100 years ago. Like I said, nobody wanted to be here, so some people took advantage of that. Does anybody know what ethnic group kind of dominates the Diamond District in New York?
Hasidic Jews.
Yes, the very conservative Jewish families, you guys. Because of that, guess what won't be open today? Most of the Diamond stores. It's the Sabbath and it's Saturday. They close down at sundown on Friday. They have to be home. They have to not use electricity for the day. They won't open again until tomorrow morning. Now, because it's 2015, you will see diamond shops that are not owned by very conservative Jewish families. They might be Jewish, they might not be Jewish at all. They may be open today, but by and large, you're gonna see a lot of empty windows. The city actually lets this neighborhood govern itself in a very interesting way. Because it's so historic and because it's run by basically one ethnic group. If they have business disputes between each other, the city lets them call a rabbi down before they call the cops. So hopefully the rabbi can take care of things before they have to get the city involved. If they have to, they will call the police, but they do try to settle it within their group. When you buy a diamond in this neighborhood, the city of New York protects it. They don't like signing their names to paper, so you won't get a contract. They'll shake your hand. In this neighborhood for about 3 blocks, that is a legally binding document. Film it, take a picture, do whatever you have to do. But that's what they'll do to say, okay, you give me the money, I give you the diamond, this is it. If they shake your hand in Chinatown, you guys, it's not a legally binding document. Only in this neighborhood, and only because it's so old and historic. Now, Fifth Avenue is very famous for something. Does anybody know what it is?
Is it the middle?
Fashion and what?
Is it the middle of the city?
Yeah, it's also the exact middle of the city. That's really great, actually.
Thank you.
Mostly fashion, though. This is where the expensive shopping in New York is. You guys see that? There's a truck in the way. The big building with all the American flags on it? That's Saks Fifth Avenue. Starting at Saks, the stores get more expensive and more fancy. Up there, you'll see the Cartier mansion. You'll see Tiffany & Company, like the Tiffany & Company. Breakfast at Tiffany's, Tiffany & Company. Oh, that one. Audrey Hepburn. You'll see Bergdorf Goodman. You will see FAO Schwartz for 2 more days. It closes tomorrow, you guys. Which, for 2 more days, is the most famous toy store in the world. Big giant piano on the ground. You can dance on it like Tom Hanks in the movie Big for 2 more days. So you have to do it today or tomorrow, because then it's gone, unfortunately. You'll see Bloomingdale's up there. You'll see Louis Vuitton, Coach, Chanel, all of the expensive shops. A lot of those stores were where the millionaires of New York used to shop all the time. They used to have such strict dress codes that if you weren't dressed nice enough, you didn't get to go inside. Now today in 2015, you can look like a homeless person, but have $1 million. So they let everybody shop, but the idea is that you're gonna go in and spend thousands of dollars. Almost everybody who works on Fifth Avenue works strictly for commission. If they don't sell anything, they don't get paid for the day. These are some of the best salespeople in the world, you guys. You walk into the store, they like a hawk. Like, whoop, okay, and they're good. Like, you walk in, you're like, I don't need anything, and you walk out with like clothing or leather gloves that cost like $100 that you didn't know you needed. Or if you go into the department stores, you're like, I didn't know I needed a chopper for my onions, but you totally have one now. Really expensive stuff. You will see a lot of celebrity shopping here. If you've heard of people like Beyonce, she shops on Fifth Avenue. Angelina Jolie, usually with a crowd of paparazzi behind her. She's one of the only celebrities in New York that you'll see the paparazzi trailing behind. This is a city where people walk. The celebrities are out. Nobody bothers them. Usually it's just the tourists, and even then, they're kind of like, that's not Beyonce. There's no way that could be. It is Beyonce. But people kind of just leave them alone. You'll see a lot of celebrity shopping here because they live on the Upper East Side. That's where a lot of them live. That's where the big money has always kind of been. Very beautiful church, one of the largest in the United States, Catholic churches. A lot of famous events have happened here. One of the most famous was probably JFK's memorial, you guys. This is where Jackie Kennedy decided to have his memorial service. She lived in New York, so it kind of made sense. He decided. I mean, wow.
We're inside St. Patrick's Cathedral. They're doing a $175 million restoration. So there is some scaffolding. But we'll take a look at some of the stained glass windows.
You guys, is the main promenade to Rockefeller Center. Rockefeller Center was built in the 1930s by John D. Rockefeller Jr. It was initially going to be 14 office towers, Radio City Music Hall, and the home to the Metropolitan Opera. He built all of it except for the opera, you guys. Believe it or not, right here on Fifth Avenue, this entryway was supposed to be the entryway to the Opera House, which was going to be located in the center of this platform. He ran out of money, so they didn't end up building it here. They ended up building it at Lincoln Center in the 1960s. Now, Rockefeller Center was built amidst the Great Depression. People thought he was crazy. 14 office towers at a time when Americans didn't have jobs, you guys. Now, he finished it around 1939. However, as he was building it, a very famous building opened a little bit farther south in Manhattan. It was in 1931. It was called the Empire State Building. Can anybody guess what the nickname of the Empire State Building was?
Empty.
The Empty State Building, absolutely, because nobody was working. So people were like, Rockefeller, you can't put your name on this. You need to come up with another name. That way when it bombs, your family isn't completely like shamed for it. But he said, look, if I'm gonna build it, I'm going big or I'm going home. I'm gonna put my name right on top of it. he ended up lucking out. Due to the Great Depression, a very interesting form of entertainment took over the United States. Americans couldn't afford to go to the theater anymore. Movies were also a little bit expensive, but guess what was free? Radio. You bought a radio and you could turn it on every night, and if you couldn't afford to leave the house, you and your family could be entertained right in your living room. Major radio corporations started to sweep the United States of America. ABC, CBS, NBC, RKO. Well, guess what? They needed a home in New York City to broadcast. Does anybody know what the nickname for Rockefeller Center is? Radio City! Oh! Because all the radio corporations made their home here. In fact, the biggest one was right in the main tower behind us, and they're still here today, you guys. NBC is known for its television today, but they were originally a radio corporation, and they used to broadcast from this tower. Now they film a lot of their most famous TV shows inside. Everyone's heard of SNL before? Saturday Night Live? It's a comedy show every week. They film it live from inside this building. Jimmy Fallon, anybody? Oh, absolutely. You may have heard of the TV show 30 Rock. It's about TV production in New York. Guess what the address of this is? 30 Rockefeller Center. It's actually about the building right behind us. We'll let everybody catch on up. Now, does anybody watch the Today Show at all? Oh, well, they film it right on that corner. Anytime you see people waving, wearing shirts, right over there where it says NBC News, on the bottom floor, the big windows, you can stand outside, you can wave, wear funny t-shirts, things like that. They film the news from the second floor. So NBC is still very active here. Right in front of us is a restaurant during the summertime. But what's famous is in the wintertime, this becomes the famous Rockefeller ice skating rink, you guys. It's a lot smaller in real life, just like the New Year's Eve ball. But anytime you see that ice skating rink in New York, 9 times out of 10 it's right here, right on the bottom platform. The flags located here are all 50 American states. The flags do change sometimes. If you had been here on the 4th of July, every single flag was an American flag. There you go, 43 seconds.
43 seconds of hell.
Alrighty, have a good time.
I don't like heights. I don't like heights.
And good luck.
You don't like heights?
No.
Oh, okay, yeah. So then
I don't like man-made heights.
Okay. A mountain's fine.
Welcome to Top of the Rock.
So yeah, we'll head out. So in front of us, obviously, is the big landmark. Only get as close to the glass as you're comfortable with. That's Central Park, you guys. Not only is it one of the biggest parks in the world, looking behind all of you, it's the largest man-made park on the planet. Everything you see inside, from the trees to the beds of grass to the big lakes to the boulders, it's all was put there, you guys. None of it was natural to the area before they built it. The architect designed it in such a way that even skilled New Yorkers get lost inside. The idea is to confuse your mind and make you stay in the park. We live in a concrete jungle, so if you decide you're going to be brave enough to go into the park, he wants to keep you there for a while so that you can escape from the city. I've lived in New York City for about 6 years now. I still have not seen the entire thing, you guys. That's where Donald Trump lives. That's where Beyonce and Jay-Z live. That's where Angelina and Brad live, you guys. It's old money.
Upper East
Anytime
Side.
through history, on the right-hand side of the park, anytime in history you read about wealthy people in New York, that's always been a wealthy neighborhood. Now on the left-hand side of the park, you'll notice the Upper West Side. From the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, that was like the middle-class neighborhood in New York City. That's where you would have raised a middle-class family. However, due to gentrification throughout the whole city, it's become ridiculously expensive to live there as well. That's where Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker live. They're raising their kids in the area. Both of them are native New Yorkers that still live in the city. You'll see the Museum of Natural History, kind of looking at that castle building on the side of the park, about a third of the way in. Night at the Museum, if you guys have ever seen that film, takes place inside. The building inside the park to the right is the Metropolitan Museum of Art, my favorite museum in New York City. Again, I've never seen the entire thing. It's so massive, absolutely beautiful. You'll notice directly in front of us one of the most famous buildings on the planet, the Empire State Building, built in 1931. It was the tallest building in the world that year, you guys. Today, there are much taller buildings all over the planet. However, New York City still does have some of the tallest buildings in the world. In the back, you'll notice World Trade Center 1, the Freedom Tower. It actually was completed last year. The observatory opened about 2 months ago. That is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. It stands at 1,776 feet high. It is not the tallest building in the world. That's still in Dubai, 6 feet high. The second tallest building in the skyline is Empire State, believe it or not. When the original World Trade Center fell, the Empire State became the tallest building in New York City once again, like it had been decades ago. However, now it's been bumped to number 2. Number 3 is this weird looking building to the right. That's the Bank of America Tower, you guys. That's their headquarters here in New York. Just to the right of that, with the H&M on top of it, is the 4th highest building in New York City. Now, if you look just a little bit farther to the right, that's the new headquarters to the New York Times. So I showed you the old one when we started the tour. That's where they write the paper today. That building is the 5th tallest building in New York City, and it actually shares that title with the building all the way on the left. You'll notice behind MetLife, you guys, is the Chrysler Building. Built in 1929, it too used to be the tallest building in the world for about 2 years. When they built the Bank of America Tower, they purposely built it the exact same height as the Chrysler Building because it didn't want to bump that historic building any farther down the list. Past the World Trade Center to the right, you'll see a little island with a statue sticking up on top of it. It's very small from where we're standing. That's Lady Liberty. We're going to see her a lot closer today, you guys. To the left, you'll notice Brooklyn. Brooklyn attached to both the Manhattan Bridge, and then farther down is the Brooklyn Bridge, which we'll see a little bit closer on our tour today as well.
My mother brought me here in 1965 to see a new movie called The Sound of Music.
Oh my God.
Did you get no, you got the back. I
Yes, the corner hot dog stand. And Knishes, of course. Those are the best. I used to live off of those when I worked in New York.
So expensive. Right across the street is the world famous Radio City, you guys. Built as a part of Rockefeller Center. I told you it was going to be called the International Music Hall. However, they had to change the name when they had to shuffle around because of the Germany Tower. Radio City was built to revive vaudeville in the United States. You may have heard of vaudeville before. Vaudeville was like a traveling show. You would see singers, dancers, comedians, poodles that would drum through hoops of fire. Big 300-pound women would play the saxophone and they'd hula hoop, you guys. Anything you could convince people to pay money for, you could do it in vaudeville. However, vaudeville died around the time of the Great Depression. Why? Because it was too expensive for Americans to go to the theater. Rockefeller's dream was to bring it back in a big way. Vaudeville theaters maybe had 1,000 seats inside. This theater has like 5,000, everybody. So, something that was dead, people couldn't afford to do on a giant scale. As you can imagine, Radio City Music Hall flopped big time. They actually wanted to tear it out almost right away. Now, because of the Great Depression, 2 other forms of entertainment became big. Radio, which Radio City totally got its name for, and movies. Movies were a form of escapist art for people in the U.S. You could pay a nickel in small towns, maybe a quarter here in New York City to go see a film. They actually put a movie screen on this stage. 5,000 seats, all watching one movie. Now, who here has ever seen Annie? The movie. When Daddy Warbucks takes her to the movie, guess where he goes? Radio City Music Hall. Now in the film, he buys out the entire auditorium, 5,000 seats, so that him, Annie, Grace, and the Punjab can sit and watch the movie by themselves, you guys, just to kind of show how much money he actually has. What they began to do was roadshow engagements of the movies. So when movies were first released, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they would travel around the country and they would have parts of the set, part of the costumes on display. There'd be big red carpet events with the celebrities when it came to each town, and you would get a program as if you were going to see a Broadway show. A lot of legendary movies played here. Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, The Sound of Music, which you actually saw,
yes,
which is amazing. But those big giant roadshow pictures kind of died out in the 1970s. One of the last ones was Mame, starring Lucille Ball. It was her last movie. It was considered a major disaster. It was one of the last premieres they ever held at Radio City before they stopped showing movies here. What ended up saving the building was the Rockettes, you guys. Because when you saw the movie at Radio City Music Hall, guess who got to perform before the film? The Rockettes. They did a little show beforehand. And they show that in the movie Annie. Well, they became so popular that they started doing actual shows to feature the Rockettes. And the big one was the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. They still do it every single year. It's how they make most of their money. You see the Rockettes, you see Santa, you hear the story of Christmas. People pay lots of money to do it. And that kind of allows them to host other things throughout the year. Mostly concerts. You'll see big celebrities performing here. Kelly Clarkson is coming soon. We just had Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett. Cher was here last year. Celtic Women was here recently. They also host the Tony Awards every year on CBS, live from Radio City. New York has had a very interesting history in regards to getting fresh water to New Yorkers. Today, the water that comes out of your tap, believe it or not, you may not believe it, is some of the freshest in the world. It actually comes from the Catskill Mountains on a 6.1 grade downhill. Collects a very unique collection of vitamins, minerals. They say it's why our pizza tastes so good, why our bagels taste so, like literally scientists say that. And you can drink it out of any faucet. However, that hasn't always been the case. There used to be a giant freshwater reservoir right here so that locals could go, but they realized about 100 years ago that wasn't gonna work so well. So they tore it down and they built this park and the library in front of it instead. Now, Bryant Park and the New York Public Library are meant to represent what used to exist on Fifth Avenue. Before the tall buildings, you guys, up and down Fifth Avenue used to be where the millionaires, like the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Astors, and the Vanderbilts used to own their mansions. They would have had full-on estates up and down Fifth Avenue. You guys have seen the movie Annie, Little Orphan Annie? Daddy Warbucks' house is supposed to be on Fifth Avenue. Now, what ended up happening about 80, 90 years ago is the city said, look, there's not enough room for you to have these giant houses. We're gonna make you tear everything down and we're gonna build apartment buildings instead. If you wanna buy the penthouse, you're more than welcome. But like people like the Vanderbilts, they went down south and they built new mansions in the southern United States. This whole park and the library in front of it is supposed to resemble what many of these giant estates would have looked like. So this would have been their grounds. It was not actually a house, but the idea they would have had horses, fountains, maybe a little lake or pond, and the beautiful mansion in the front of the yard. So right in front of us, you guys, is a big giant grassy knoll. Multi-purpose space here in New York City. A lot of stuff gets used here. You'll notice in the back, that's a movie screen. And so what they do during the summertime, they do movies in Bryant Park. Shows to kind of like drum up advertising business, things like that. But it's really cool. New Yorkers who are here for the summer, it's very popular to leave during the summertime and go somewhere else. If you're stuck here, we try to make it as bearable as possible. And these outdoor events totally help. The movies outside to kind of cool off from our hot apartments, Shakespeare in the Park, things like that, really kind of make it so the summer is fun for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, right in front of us is the New York Public Library, founded about 100 years ago by John J. Astor Jr. The Astor family was one of the major wealthy and political families here in early New York. You may have heard of the neighborhood Astoria before, named after the Astor family, or the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, named after the Astor family. Now, John J. Astor Jr. had one of the largest private collections of rare books on the planet. He used his private collection of rare books to found the New York Public Library. He gifted them to the city of New York. Today, this is the largest research library in the world. Most of the books are underground in tunnels, you guys. You have to order the collections in advance before you go inside to look at them. wonderful, magical things exist in this library. I haven't looked at like their medical or their law collections, but their theater collection, they have handwritten notes by some of the greatest composers of all time. And you can thumb through it and you could be like, oh my gosh, like you're watching basically the creation of some of the greatest works of all time. You have that paperwork. Now, the Astors were very famous. Does anybody know what happened to John J. Astor Sr. and his wife? They sunk on the Titanic, you guys. Famously, his mom and dad were on that ill-fated boat, and his mom was offered passage on a lifeboat. Now, his father was so wealthy, one of the wealthiest people on board, that he could have paid his way on a lifeboat. However, he was like, my time has come. It's my time to pay. I've made my money on the backs of very poor people. This is not for me. I'm going down with the ship. And his wife said, well, if you're going down, I'm going down too. What she did is she got off her lifeboat and she put a third-class passenger into space, pissing off all of her wealthy friends. Reportedly, they went back to their cabin, they locked the doors, and they went to bed. You know that famous scene in the movie where the old couple, when the water's coming through? That's not the Astors, but it's supposed to represent what would have actually happened to them in real life. The elevator. Took a look at the very top of the building, which is beautiful, all hand-carved and hand-painted ceilings. Wooden everywhere, it's wonderful. And behind glass I have one of the rarest books in the library on display. So welcome to the McGraw Rotunda from my friends from North America. McGraw-Hill makes most of the textbooks that are used at least in Canada as well. It's named after that famous company. This is all hand-carved and hand-painted, everything you see in this room. The murals on the walls represent famous literary moments in history. The first one is Moses and the Ten Commandments, and they get more modern.
What we're about to see is one of the oldest books available, the original Gutenberg Bible. And let's take a look.
Years it was the tallest building in the world. Now it was built at the
1929.
exact same time as another famous New York City building that everyone's pretty much forgotten about. We call it the Manhattan Trust, and it's down on Wall Street. They were built at the exact same time, and both of their goals was to be the tallest building in the world. They were at a building war with each other. Now the architects kept changing the designs, and every couple weeks you'd read in the paper, the Manhattan Trust will be the tallest building in the world. And then you'd read, nope, the Chrysler Building will be the tallest building in the world. And they fought back and forth. Now the Manhattan Trust had the benefit of opening 2 weeks before the Chrysler Building. So they had this giant party on the roof because it was the tallest building in the world, and they got really drunk and they started to celebrate. Little did they know, you see that little spire up at the top of the building? That hadn't been published as part of the actual designs of the building. It was built in secret inside the elevator shaft. Everyone was sworn to secrecy. Once they began celebrating downtown, the architect began to move the spire up through the elevator shaft, push it through the top of the building. Once it was installed 2 weeks later, they said, we're the tallest building in the world, and there's nothing you can do about it. For 2 years, it held the title. Now, Mr. Chrysler paid for this building out of pocket. It wasn't built by the Chrysler Corporation, it was built by him personally. The reason he did this was so that he could leave it to his children. If a company owns a building, they continue to own it after you die. However, if he paid for this out of pocket, that meant he left something to his family when he passed, you guys. That was very important to him. Because he paid for it out of pocket, he was being a cheapskate. He didn't want to pay for anything extra. He didn't know about the spire. And instead of being excited about owning the tallest building in the world, he got super pissed off at the architect. Famously, he didn't pay for the last third of the building. He's like, you didn't tell me about this. I'm not sending my last installment for the property. So he ended up getting it for kind of a good deal because the architect didn't tell him about what he was doing. It's been featured in a ton of movies, not King Kong. That was the Empire State Building, you guys. But Spider-Man, he's flinging from all of those gargoyles up there. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, right in front of us is Grand Central Terminal, one of New York's 2 historic grand train stations, and it's the only one that's still standing. Built in 1913 by the Vanderbilts, this was basically meant to move the train traffic that used to be above ground on Park Avenue, to the basement below, so that the soot from the trains wouldn't get in the backyards of the mansions that used to be on Fifth Avenue. Literally, the Vanderbilts had become part of the wealthy elite, and their rich buddies were like, look, we don't like the trains in our backyard. So he built this train station so the trains could literally dock underneath the ground to keep the soots off of their grounds. Now, the other famous train station was Penn Station, you guys. And Penn Station was thought to be, by many people, the most beautiful train station in the world. Today, that's Madison Square Garden. Now, famously, they tore down Penn Station in 1963. Major controversy. Architects around the world wept because they thought, how could you tear down such a historic and beautiful building? However, Americans stopped taking trains by the 1960s. We were either flying everywhere or we were driving. Train travel became less important to this country. So they tore down Penn Station because we really didn't need it. Now, a very famous American got very upset. Her name was Jackie Kennedy, you guys. And she found out that in 1967, they wanted to tear down this station as well. She single-handedly protected the building, saved it from the wrecking ball, saved it from demolition. Now, after she saved the building, she ended up protecting the meatpacking district right in Chelsea by the High Line. She saved all of those historic buildings down there because she used to go to the nightclubs there. And after she saved the buildings in the meatpacking district, she set up the historical societies today to protect almost every historical building in the city. It's thanks to Jackie Kennedy that you're not allowed to tear down anything anymore. The foyer to the station itself is actually dedicated to her.
This is a Saturday. I can imagine during the week when the commuters are here what it's like.
So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main terminal of Grand Central. You've seen it in movies, you've seen it on YouTube. It's bigger in real life. This is one of those things in New York City that's actually bigger than anything makes it look like in the public. It's massive. Built in 1913. Like I said, in 1967 they were ready to tear it down. Jackie Kennedy saved it, they began to restore it. Today it's more successful than it ever was 100 years ago. And that's because in the 60s and 70s, a lot of young professionals began to move to New York City. They made it big on Wall Street, medical field, Broadway, things like that. Then they began to raise families. This is not an ideal place to raise a family. So they began to go to upstate or to Connecticut or New Hampshire, to these small little townships, beautiful little cities right outside of New York, you guys. And very close by if you take the commuter trains. This train station sees about 800,000 commuters every single day of people servicing upstate New York, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. Now the roof, you will notice the constellations in the sky. When they cleaned the roof in the 1960s, they did not know there were constellations underneath it. The entire roof was tarred black. They thought it was from all of the trains servicing the station, all of the soot. However, scientists tested the tar on the roof. It wasn't from the trains, you guys. Can anybody guess what it was from? Tobacco. People were smoking. So they kept a little rectangle. If you look by Cancer, they did it on purpose. Right by the crab, underneath it, there's a little gray rectangle on the marble. The entire roof was that color in the 60s when they cleaned it off. Now, when they cleaned it off, they were very shocked to find the constellations are backwards. They're not the way you see them in the sky. And they didn't know why. So they started to spread around the myth. Well, because some of the wealthiest people in the world would have come through this train station, it was to give everybody inside God's view of the heavens. So we're God looking through the heavens. Earth is on the other side. They ended up finding paperwork in the Hall of Records, though. The painters messed up. The architect designed the painting to be held on the ground and copied this way. They held it the wrong way. So right in front of us is a little archway. This is the famous Whispering Gallery of Grand Central, you guys. Believe it or not, the architecture is perfect, that it takes sound from one diagonal and it travels very secretly all the way to the other. There's no speakers, there's no microphones, it's just on marble and other places on the planet. The reason this was built was so that undercover cops could be reported crimes here in the train station, and it could help to kind of keep everything safe. However, in the 1920s, it became really popular for the mob and for bootleggers to come on down, and you would wait at certain corners and just listen, and they would whisper the address of the local speakeasy, and then you would find out where the local bar was, hidden from the government. Today, it's just a big old You need to be about 3 inches away, okay? If you stand there, you can also listen, but turn your ears toward the crevice as well.
So she's speaking down there, and you're supposed to be able to hear it right here. All right, I'm 3 inches away. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I actually heard her. All right, it was a success. We're in the subway station at Grand Central Station. The station's pretty small, but it's old. That's probably why. And use the Metro card.